Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The morning air was crisp as Ethan Cole stepped onto the small stage, the wooden planks creaking slightly beneath his feet. It was a modest setup, just a single podium and a few banners with his campaign logo flapping in the light breeze. The crowd before him was sparse but eager, a mixture of middle-aged workers, students, and young families holding hastily made signs of support. Ethan straightened his tie and adjusted his jacket, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment he had been working toward for months. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "I am Ethan Cole, and I am running for office because our democracy deserves better." A few cheers rang out, though the response was quieter than usual. Ethan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been creeping in over the last few weeks. His campaign, once filled with energy and momentum, seemed to be slowing. There had been fewer mentions of his name in the news, less engagement on social media. At first, he chalked it up to the usual ebb and flow of political races. But as the days went by, he realized something more insidious was happening. He pressed on, delivering his speech with passion. He talked about government corruption, about the importance of transparency, about giving a voice to the voiceless. Yet, as he scanned the faces in the audience, a strange sensation crept up his spine. People were listening, but there was a distance, as if he were speaking through a fog. After the rally, Ethan returned to his campaign headquarters, a small office crammed with volunteers and makeshift desks. His campaign manager, Lily, greeted him with a concerned look. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had been with him since the beginning, her dedication unwavering. "Not bad, right?" Ethan asked, hoping for some reassurance. Lily hesitated before answering. "Yeah, you were great, but we need to talk." She led him to the back of the office where they could have some privacy. Ethan frowned, sensing something was off. "What's going on?" he asked, lowering his voice. Lily handed him a tablet. "Take a look." Ethan swiped through the screen, scanning the headlines from major news outlets. His heart sank. Not a single mention of his rally. No photos, no quotes, nothing. It was as if the event had never happened. "That sounds impossible," Ethan muttered. "We had press there. I saw them." Lily crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "They were there, but it sounds like they don't even remember it. And it's not just this rally. All our coverage has been dropping off over the last few weeks. We're being erased, Ethan." The word erased hit him hard. He slumped into a chair, running a hand through his hair. "But why? We haven't done anything illegal. We were just pushing for change." Lily leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "I think it's something bigger than that. This isn't just political games. I've been hearing rumors about tech being used to silence opposition, something about making people invisible." Ethan's pulse quickened, invisible like censorship. "Worse," Lily said. "Is a scientist. She used to work for the government. She claims they've developed a way to make people disappear, not just physically, but digitally and psychologically, like they never existed." Ethan stared at her, disbelief warring with a creeping sense of dread. "That's insane." "It is, but it's happening," Lily insisted, "and it's happening to us." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to process what she was saying. Could this be true? Could the government really have the power to make him disappear, not just from the media, but from the collective memory of the public? He thought about the dwindling crowds, the lack of attention, the sudden drop in online support. It was as if his entire campaign had been slowly fading into the background, slipping away from reality. "Who sent this scientist?" he asked finally. "Can she help us?" Lily glanced around the room, as if expecting someone to be listening. "Her name is Rachel Wynn. She's sent underground now, hiding from the people who want her dead. But if anyone knows how to stop this, it's sent her." Ethan's mind raced. He had always suspected corruption in the government, but this was something else entirely. If what Lily was saying was true, then the entire election was a sham controlled by an unseen force with the power to eliminate its enemies without leaving a trace. "We have to find her," Ethan said, standing up before it seemed too late. 2 days later, Ethan found himself standing in the shadow of an old, dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of town. The address Lily had given him seemed abandoned, with rusted metal doors and broken windows. But this was where Rachel Wynn had told him to meet her. He glanced around, pulling his jacket tighter against the cold before knocking on the door. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a small slit in the door slid open. revealing a pair of sharp eyes. "Ethan Cole," a voice asked. "Yes," Ethan replied, his heart pounding. The door creaked open and a woman stepped into view. She was younger than he had expected, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail and a no-nonsense expression. Her clothes were plain practical, a stark contrast to the high-tech gadgets strapped to her belt. "Come in," she said, glancing around nervously, quickly. Ethan followed her inside, the door clanging shut behind them. The interior of the warehouse was cluttered with old machinery and tools, but in the center was a makeshift lab, complete with computers, monitors, and strange devices Ethan couldn't begin to understand. Rachel Wynn turned to face him, her arms crossed. "I don't know how much you've been told, but I'm gonna give it to you straight. The government is using advanced cloaking technology to make people disappear. And by disappear, I mean they're re-erasing them from existence. Physically, mentally, digitally. It's like they never existed. That's what is happening to you, Ethan." Ethan swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "Why me?" "Because you read a threat," Rachel said bluntly. "Your campaign is gaining traction, and the people behind this election can't afford to let someone like you disrupt their control. So they've made you invisible. Your speeches aren't being broadcast. Your face isn't showing up on social media, and people are forgetting who you are. They were doing the same to your supporters." Ethan stared at her, trying to wrap his mind around the enormity of what she was saying. How do I stop it? Rachel hesitated, then gestured to one of the devices on her workbench. "I've been working on a way to reverse the invisibility. It's not perfect, but it could give you a short period of time where you will be visible again, long enough to make an impact." Ethan approached the device, a sleek black box with wires snaking out of it. "What does it do?" "It emits a counter frequency that disrupts the cloaking field," Rachel explained. "But it's risky. The technology is still unstable. You could get hurt or worse." Ethan nodded slowly, his mind racing with possibilities. This was his chance, his only chance to fight back. If he could use this device to expose the truth, to show the world what was happening, then maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tide. "I'll do it," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." Rachel nodded, her expression grim. "We'll need to be careful. Once you activate this, they'll know you re-onto them, and they won't stop until you re-gone, for good." Ethan met her gaze, his resolve hardening. "I am ready." The night of the final debate arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Ethan stood backstage watching as Governor Julian Knox made his way to the podium, his polished smile never faltering. Knox was the perfect puppet, a charismatic figurehead who spoke of unity and progress, while the shadow government pulled the strings behind the scene. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced at the device hidden beneath his jacket. This was it, his moment to expose the truth, to reveal the invisible hand manipulating the election. As the moderator introduced the candidates, Ethan stepped onto the stage, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the weight of the device pressing against his side, a constant reminder of the danger he was about to face. Governor Knox smiled at him, but there was something cold in his eyes, a smug confidence that made Ethan's skin crawl. "Mr. Cole," Knox said smoothly, "I must say it's an honor to share this stage with you, though I am afraid your campaign has been rather quiet lately." Ethan gritted his teeth, refusing to rise to the bait. He took his place behind the podium, his mind racing with a plan Rachel had outlined. He had to time it perfectly. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. The debate began, and for the first few minutes, everything proceeded as usual. Knox gave his polished answers, deflecting tough questions with ease while Ethan struggled to make himself heard. It was happening again, the invisibility, the slow erasure of his presence. But then, as Knox launched into yet another rehearsed speech, Ethan reached beneath his jacket and activated the device. There was a soft hum, and for a split second, everything seemed to freeze. The audience gasped. Ethan glanced around, his heart racing. At first, nothing seemed to have changed. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw them figures materializing out of thin air, stepping onto the stage as if emerging from the shadow. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the figures fully appeared, their faces slowly coming into focus under the harsh stage light. They were men and women dressed in suits and formal attire, politicians, journalists, and activists who had vanished from public life without explanation. He recognized several of them immediately, their faces once familiar from headlines and rallies, now pale and gaunt from their time in invisibility. It was as if ghosts had stepped out of the shadows, reclaiming their place in the world. The audience erupted into murmurs, confusion spreading through the room like wildfire. Cameras panned wildly across the stage, trying to capture the impossible. The debate moderator stammered, completely thrown off script. Ethan Zell's pulse raced. The device was working. For a split second, Governor Knox faltered, his polished demeanor slipped, his eyes widening as he looked at the newly visible figure. But he quickly recovered, turning to Ethan with a cold, forced smile. "What is this?" Knox asked, his voice tight. Some kind of trick. Ethan Zell's fingers gripped the edge of the podium, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't a trick. This is the truth. These people were erased by the fairy government that's been controlling this election by UNOT. These people were made invisible, so they couldn't speak, couldn't fight back. But they're in here now, and the world will know." A few of the reappeared figures moved closer to Ethan, some of them still disoriented, as if they weren't sure whether they were truly seen. One woman, an older gray-haired activist Ethan recognized, stepped forward, tears in her eyes as she reached out to touch her own face, marveling at her return to visibility. "I was gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but the microphones caught it. "I thought I would never be seen again." The murmurs from the audience turned into an uproar, some people standing, others shouting questions. The cameras zoomed in, broadcasting every word, every movement. The invisible were now unmistakably visible, and the world was watching. Knox clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he took a step toward Ethan, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't know what you were doing, Cole. You were playing with fire. You have no idea the forces you were up against." Ethan stared him down, the weight of everything finally hitting him. Now came the real danger. Knox wasn't just a corrupt politician. He was a puppet of something far larger, a shadow government with the power to erase anyone who posed a threat to their control. Oh, the exposure had only just begun, and they would come for him now, harder than ever before. But Ethan wasn't backing down. "You can't hide this anymore," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "People are waking up, they see what you've done, they'll demand answers, and they cut back their government." Knox's eyes glinted with something dark, fear perhaps, but also anger. For the first time, he wasn't in control. The stage, the cameras, the audience, they were all slipping from his grasp. He turned sharply toward his security detail, barking orders under his breath. But before they could react, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the auditorium. Armed men in black tactical gear burst into the hall, their weapons drawn, and the crowd screamed, pushing toward the exit. Panic surged through the room. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. They were coming for him. Rachel had warned him. The moment he activated the device, they would know. The shadow government would let this exposure stand. They couldn't. The armed men moved quickly, pushing through the crowd with brutal efficiency, their eyes locked on Ethan. He felt a hand grab his arm. Rachel. She had appeared out of the wings, her face pale but determined. "We have to go now," she hissed, pulling him toward the side exit. "They were here to take you down." Ethan hesitated, glancing back at the stage where the reappeared figures stood, confused and afraid. "We can just leave them," he protested. Rachel shook her head, her grip tightening. "We can't help them if we did Ethan. If they get you, everything you've done will be for nothing. We need to get to a secure location, get this podcast out to more people." Ethan's mind raced. The truth was out there now, but it wasn't high enough. They had to do more than just reveal the invisible people. They had to dismantle the entire system behind it. He nodded, following Rachel as they slipped out of the side door just as the armed men reached the stage. The air outside was cold and biting as they raced down the alley, their footsteps echoing off the brick wall. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline surging through him. This wasn't over. They had exposed the conspiracy, but the shadow government would come back harder, more violently than before. They had to act fast. Rachel led him to a waiting car, and they jumped inside. She threw the car into gear, speeding away from the building as the chaos of the debate hall faded into the distance. Ethan slumped back in his seat, his mind racing. "We need to get this footage to the right people," Rachel said, her eyes focused on the road ahead. "They'll try to spin it as a hoax, say it's sign fake, but if we can get this out fast enough, we'll force them into the light." Ethan nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. Knox's words kept echoing in his mind. You don't know what you were up against. The shadow government wasn't just a small group of corrupt officials. It was something much larger, much deeper, and now he was their target. Hours passed in a blur as they drove through the night, changing cars twice to throw off any pursuit. Finally, Rachel pulled into the underground parking garage of a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. They hurried inside, taking a service elevator up to a small secure apartment that Rachel had set up as a safe house. Ethan collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion finally catching up with him. What now? He asked, rubbing his eye. Rachel sat across from him, her expression grim. Now we wait. I've sent the footage to every independent journalist and media outlet I trust. It's only a matter of time before the story breaks wide open. Ethan nodded, though unease gnawed at him. This felt too easy. The shadow government wouldn't he just let them expose this without a fight? And sure enough, as the first rays of dawn filtered through the windows, the breaking news alerts started to flood in. Breaking opposition candidate Ethan Cole exposes government conspiracy. Is this the end of the election as we know it? Invisible no more. Dozens of political figures reappear during live debate. The headlines were everywhere, but with them came the backlash. Government spokespeople immediately denounced the footage as a hoax, calling it an elaborate deepfake designed to sow chaos in the election. Knox appeared on national television, calm and collected, dismissing the reappeared figures as political operatives hired to create confusion. This is the work of desperate people, Knox said, his voice dripping with condescension. They know they can, so they resort to these kinds of tactics. But the American people are smarter than that. We won, be fooled. Ethan's stomach twisted. The lies were coming thick and fast, and people were already starting to believe them. The shadow government had deep roots, and they controlled more than just elections. They controlled the narrative itself. Rachel paced the room, her face tight with worry. We need something more. We need undeniable proof that this technology exists, that it's being used right now. Ethan looked up at her, a sinking feeling settling in his chest. How do we do that? Rachel stopped pacing, her eyes locking onto his. There's only one place where we can find the evidence we need. The lab where they developed the invisibility technology. If we can get in there and steal the data, we can expose them once and for all. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. You know where it is. Rachel nodded slowly. I do, but it's centrally guarded. If we go in there, there's no guarantee we'll come out. Ethan stood up, his jaw set. We don't have a choice. If we don't try to do this, they'll bury the truth again, and more people will disappear. Rachel hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll finish this. Together, they left the safe house, the weight of what they were about to do hanging heavily in the air. This was their last chance. They would either expose the truth and take down the shadow government, or they would disappear, just like the others.